Welcome to Terra Verde. From KPFA and the Earth Island Journal, I'm Fiona McLeod, the host and producer of today's show. If you are someone who feels concerned or overwhelmed or afraid because of the numerous overlapping existential threats facing our world today, you are not alone. From climate change and environmental destruction to social inequity, wealth inequality, and violence, we're at a moment of intensifying crises, and it can feel like we're barreling toward an unlivable future. My guest today is Jeremy Lent, who suggests that at this moment, humanity faces an imminent choice. We can either continue with a system built on extraction and exploitation and endless growth, or we can reimagine civilization itself. So today we'll be talking about that reimagination, looking at the sweeping scope of transformation needed and how an alternate eco-civilization might actually be achieved. We'll hear about important work being done across sectors and at various scales that shows how another world is not only possible, but is already taking root. Jeremy Lent is an author and speaker whose work explores pathways towards a life-affirming future. He's the founder of the Deep Transformation Network and a founding member of the Eco-Civilization Coalition. Jeremy is the author of a number of books, including The Patterning Instinct and The Web of Meaning, and most recently, Eco-Civilization, Making a World That Works for All, which was published in May. Jeremy, welcome to Terra Verde, and thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks very much. Looking forward to this conversation, Fiona.
Me as well. Let's just start with the word eco-civilization. In broad strokes, what does that mean?
Well, really, it's a vision of that reimagination of our future that you were just mentioning. It's essentially the a kind of a vision or a framework for a civilization that was built on a different foundation than our current one of extraction and exploitation. Instead, a civilization built simply on setting the conditions for all beings to thrive on a regenerating Earth.
That sounds pretty good to me. Um, and before we jump in to talk about the future and eco-civilization and how we get there, I would love it if you would talk about that paradigm that we live in today, as you said, of exploitation and extraction and how we got here and where is it leading us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great place to begin. And I appreciate how you just introduced the show itself, that this is for people who are looking at this reality we're facing. And it is a pretty bleak reality as we look out there. And a big portion of my book is to look at really to deeply understand how we got into this horrible mess that we are in right now. And so, for example, one of the early chapters is called The History They Didn't Teach You at School. And, it looks basically 500 years ever since really the sort of scientific revolution and the modernist worldview arose in early modern Europe around the 17th century. 500 years of basically colonialism and exploitation, extraction, looking at the earth as basically a resource to exploit, other people as people to exploit. Um, and actually, it turns out, not coincidentally, that right around that same time, within just a generation or two of the same period, the first limited liability corporations got created that were designed to make the exploitation of the colonies as efficiently as possible. And really, it was the beginning of the dominant system, really of the economic system to really manage that exploitation extraction that we now know today as global capitalism. So without looking at those deep layers of what we have right now, it's really impossible to look at what needs to be transformed. And also, it's not convincing. Why do we need to transform everything? And so that's a big part of what we have to look at, is really looking at what this system's about.
In your investigation of human history to this point,
Yeah.
one of the concepts in your book and that I've heard you speak about is the Wendigo diagnosis and the Wendigo effect. Will you
Yeah.
talk about that?
That's right. So, so when we were talking about just colonialism before, so when the Europeans first got to North America, the Ojibwe people, a whole set of tribes in around the Great Lakes area, they looked at this onslaught of these people that they were trying to make sense of. And what made sense to them was actually a myth that they used to scare the kids with around the campfires, whatever, as the myth of the Wendigo monster. And this was this gigantic monster with a heart of ice that was always ravenously hungry. But the thing about this monster was the more it ate, the hungrier it became. And then even more terrifying is if it bit you, you instantly got infected by this Wendigo sort of virus, and you became a Wendigo monster. And they looked at these Europeans. They went, "These are like Wendigo." So I kind of riffed on that. That, by the way, is a story that Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about in Braiding Sweetgrass, and that's the first place I came across it. But it's been written about it in other places too. But I sort of took that almost like as a really an organizing metaphor around our society, because when you look at what corporations are now, shareholder owned corporations, they literally are that Wendigo monster in the sense that they could have a great year and show tons of earnings for shareholders. The shareholders don't even care about that. What they care about is how are you going to increase that next year and the year after? And that's what they value the stock price of the company on. So it's literally that Wendigo sort of virus. But this is what our world is organized around.
Yeah, it's such a apt metaphor for the kind of
Yeah.
insatiable hunger of capitalism, and that their capitalism knows no end to the amount of destruction it can and will
Yeah.
cause.
Exactly. And I guess really where that leads to, and this was really a discovery that I came to in the 5 years that I did the research of the book itself, is at first, like many people, I imagine maybe most people looking at all the stuff going on, and we're looking at how do we fix the system? Like the system's broken. How do we make things better? And that's what I thought I was going to be researching. And it slowly dawned on me after a while, and I write about it in the book. The system isn't broken. The system's actually doing exactly what it was intended to do. It's a system that is designed to extract and exploit, like that Wendigo monster, as fast as possible, more and more and more. And actually, it's doing a better job now than it's ever done before. I mean, what we just got to see that right now, like hot off the press, the world's first trillionaire being minted by basically doing this exact Wendigo kind of exploitation faster and faster.
Right. So then, in contrast to that dominant system that we live in today, what are some of the core values that are foundational to an eco-civilization, and how do they contrast
Yeah.
with the system that we're in now?
Yeah, that so they are basically almost the diametric opposite of this actual dominant system. So in place of, I mean, really starting in the deep sort of ontological foundations, in place of what we call anthropocentrism, we're really looking at humans as being the only sort of entity of value in the world, and the whole rest of life on Earth being there as a resource for us. It moves to the sense of ecocentrism, looking really at humans as having a place as stewards in the living earth, but really looking from that shift in basis. Um, and it looks, rather than having a system of capitalism, a system based on extraction exploitation, it begins with a sense of human dignity as being the absolute basis that everything gets to be organized around. And from there, it leads to there's certain sort of core principles that arise um, and it's important to make this real clear. These are not like sort of my ideas. I've thought about and I've come up with certain principles. These are really just an agglomeration, a collection, and an integration of the core values and principles of indigenous peoples all around the world. There's this, even though they're very different in many different parts of the world, there's a core sense of what's known as indigeneity. These are shared principles not surprisingly, because these are principles that are consistent with our human evolved mode of flourishing. And they're also consistent with many of the core foundational values of the world's great religions and spiritual traditions, as well as all kinds of different groups working right now looking for justice and fairness. So this is more something like these are shared human values. And so other concepts like this would be ideas around sort of diversity rather than this homogenization that we have in the world today and commodification. It's really recognizing and celebrating each different unique culture and person's way of finding their own flourishing rather than saying it's meant to be a certain way. And along with that is this core concept that is very much, again, taken from life's own core learnings, which is called subsidiarity, which is pushing power down to the lowest level in the system, rather than having either the markets or hierarchical autocrats or the state of any kind telling you what to do. It's like individuals within community can build their own sense of that. So these are just some of the sort of core principles, among others.
Yeah, and as I understand it, a lot of throughout the book, you talk about how this process of imagining and moving towards eco-civilization also follows evolution itself and patterns that are
Yes.
seen in nature over time.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Really, that's even more fundamental than those principles I just said. Like, that's actually one of the reasons I got so excited about the term ecological civilization or eco-civilization when I first came across it. Because when we looked at the scope, we got to redesign the entire civilization. But the source of what that design comes from is life itself, to your point. And when you do when you sort of find out what evolutionary biologists really understand about life itself, um, what you discover is that there's only, well, ecosystems themselves have competition, cooperation in kind of roughly equal balance around them, and that really helps to make sure they're rich. And yeah, that's something to be celebrated in itself. But the great transitions in life's complexity on Earth, ever since it began billions of years ago, all came about, it turns out, through different species learning how to collaborate more intensively together, which is called by biologists mutually beneficial symbiosis. And that's the great secret to life. And you see that if you just walk around in an ecosystem, you have the trees photosynthesizing and all the insects and the animals and even the fungal networks working in symbiosis to make the thing rich. And so if you take that and apply that to human flourishing, you find that it's absolutely doable. We move from a zero-sum game, this notion we're told in capitalism, where it's, if I get mine, it's at the expense of somebody else. And so we got to outcompete, to actually looking at ways to collaborate, which, by the way, is absolutely consistent with how we, our hominid ancestors from many millions of years evolved to lead to us as human beings. We are evolved to be very cooperative. And really, this whole sense of an eco-civilization is to bring us back to our core evolved needs.
Thank you for that. I'm imagining that at this point, a lot of our listeners might be wondering, how do we get there?
Yeah.
This system that we're in is so entrenched, and it can be really hard to see beyond the bounds of the system that we're living in. And it touches everything. It touches all parts of life all around the world. Um, and so I would love it if you would describe the model or the theory of change that your work is grounded in, and the third
Mm.
horizons model of change.
Yeah, that's a great place to begin. Because and maybe just to explain to understand this kind of three horizons model of change, to explain really what the book is trying to do in setting out this positive scenario. It's very important for people to understand this is not trying to put a utopia out there, saying, wouldn't it be great? And of course, we're never going to get there, anything like that. Quite the opposite. It's actually based on a well-designed sort of policy principle that's known as backcasting. And what backcasting is around is the opposite of the normal way in which we do planning, which is we look at the next step and we say, well, what can we do that's actually realistic and doable? And so when we're looking at things like policies right now, we might say, well, maybe we can push for a little bit more investment in renewables, or maybe we can push for some more taxes on those centibillionaires, or and that seems okay. Well, let's try that. But the thing is, we've been doing that for decades, and we're moving faster and faster in the wrong direction. So that's not actually a realistic approach. What backcasting does is the opposite. It says, let's look at where we actually want to end up. What would be, in this case, like a sustainable and flourishing life for people, and then look at what do we need to do to get there. So that's really what the book does. It lays out, it allows the imagination to shed all those constraints and say, what do we actually want? And then we get sort of realistic. We're back to our next steps. And that's where the Three Horizons model I find to be so valuable. And actually, it kind of structures the entire book, which is, and again, it's a model actually first designed by consulting companies and then applied by actually people very focused on change to how we think about how we think about societal change. So this it's as simple as this. Like imagine you're traveling and in an unknown land. You don't have maps. You kind of know you want to get to a distant destination, but that's about all you know. So the first horizon relates to looking right in front of you. You want to make sure you don't trip up, that you don't fall into a ditch, break a leg, and you'll never get anywhere. So first horizon, when it applies to society, is things like those get renewables done or whatever. Like it's stuff that needs to be done right in front of you. Second horizon is really interesting. Like it's almost like that beautiful horizon you see out there that you can see if you're this traveler, but there's mountains, you're not quite sure where it's going to lead you to. And second horizon in planning, in this kind of planning mode, refers to things that are truly disruptive, but stay within the same paradigm, basically of like our global capitalism that we talked about. So ideas of second horizon ideas might be things like Elon Musk inventing the Tesla, like so a complete change in from fossil fuel to what an electric vehicle could look like, but still absolutely within the capitalist syndrome. And the thing what's interesting about second horizon ideas, some of them lead right back to the first horizon. So you think you're traveling and you don't get anywhere. Some of them, however, actually leads to pathways to those mountain passes, sort of thing, to that third horizon, which is the unseen destination that you know is out there somewhere, but you don't where it is. You don't know quite where it is. And that third horizon is this eco-civilization, which again is not, I'm not even laying out as a blueprint, but more as a framework so that we can start conversations together because none of us know exactly what it'll look like, but we do have a sense of what those principles would be and some ideas of what it actually can look like. So that allows us to see how, with all these great ideas that I'm sort of highlighting that other people have come up with for different aspects of civilization in that third horizon, there are steps we can take right now to actually begin to get there.
Right. Throughout the book, you write about, as you said, the kind of third horizons model really forms the foundation of the book,
Mhm.
and you explore what first, second, and third horizon solutions might look like in various sectors, agriculture, technology,
Yeah.
finance.
Mm.
I'm wondering if you can kind of maybe pull one of those sectors from the book
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
sort of
sure.
share with our listeners um,
Uh-huh.
the framing that you provide so that folks can get a sense of, as you say, these are ideas that already exist and in many
Uh-huh.
places and
Mhm.
cases are already in motion. So will you just kind of zoom in maybe on one of those sectors?
Yeah, sure. That's a great idea. Well, and then maybe a good one to look at would be around the kind of rights of nature
Mm,
and the relationship between humans and the living earth. And maybe it's a good idea to begin first with the third horizon, which is what the book is kind of all about, is actually really rethinking. And so the third horizon concepts around here would be actually to transform, almost like a Copernican revolution, transform my very ideas of law and constitution to begin with life rather than beginning with humans. So, for example, at the UN or whatever, just like we have a UN Declaration of Human Rights, which obviously is ignored and sort of honored in the breach a lot, but it's still a foundational document that billions of people have been inspired by, and we organize a lot of laws around that. So similar, there should be a rights of Mother Earth, which have been declared in some countries in South America, like Bolivia and Ecuador. But this rights of Mother Earth could be a UN declaration that's foundational, which is very, very consistent with this wonderful document, which looks at life itself, the Earth Charter, which is kind of something that got created over a few decades ago. That would be a sort of third horizon shift. And along with that, law itself could be reorganized so that in country's constitution, the rights of nature and nature itself becomes a person and actually has rights. So if that's third horizon, we're far from that right now. Well, first horizon, once again, in things like that, is actually moving towards better standards, even within our current system, to reduce pollution, to try to sue those companies that are causing these massive, total destructive phenomena, all that stuff. Second horizon gets really interesting though. And second horizon could be something like the Stop Ecocide campaign, which got started by this brilliant visionary lawyer called Polly Higgins a decade or two ago, and has now had significant impacts where different nation states have looked at the idea of calling ecocide a crime, like a crime against nature, just like a crime against humanity, that would be the executives of corporations who commit it. So the ecocide we can understand basically as the destruction of an entire ecosystem through pollution or reckless activity. And ecocide has happened, as we know, in some places in South America, for example, fossil fuel companies have devastated entire ecosystems through reckless oil pollution. That's a sense. So this is second horizon in the sense that it's a real disruptive shift. Imagine if some ExxonMobil executive actually needs to worry that the international law might come after him for his decisions to likely cause ecocide. He might end up in jail for 20 years or something. That's huge. But it's still working within the current legal system, but it's a big change without it. So this gives you a sense of there's things we need to do right now. There's things we can work on that are currently being done that we can see how that could happen. And those ultimately could lead to that third horizon vision.
Thanks for breaking that down for us. And there's so many examples throughout the book that I just found really fascinating, and I wish we had time to talk about all of them. But I want to maybe pivot a little bit to talk about something I found really compelling, which is your thoughts on the role of education and educators in creating an eco-civilization.
Mm. Well, is super, super important because, of course, um, the only way this will happen is when new generations get to look at things in a different way than they are now. And this, by the way, I see as one of the more hopeful aspects of this terrible unraveling that we're experiencing right now. Because when that happens, new generations look at what's going on, and the first thing they realize is we can't accept what our parents' generations told us about things. Because this just makes no sense. So they look elsewhere. So it's absolutely crucial that parts of what education has to be re-envisioned about is things like helping kids understand really how they are embedded in the natural world, bring them out of the sort of classroom, and bring them to nature, find their local neighborhood where they can actually begin to connect with the living earth, and giving kids an understanding of systems thinking, which nowadays in our dominant system, you have to basically be almost at graduate school before suddenly you discover there's this whole other way of looking at life as complex systems, which totally changes everything. But that can be taught and understood by kids at a very early age, which shifts the very foundations of how you think. But if we want to move towards that third horizon, like we were just talking earlier, if it's really transformed educational system, it helps to recognize that the very system we have right now of classrooms with a teacher at the front who's this authority telling these little kids what they're meant to do and homework they have to do. And if a kid needs to go to the bathroom, they put their hand up, get permission. This whole system is basically based on a militarized vision that evolved in Prussia in the like 18th and 19th centuries when they wanted to create a whole new generation of kids that would grow up to be soldiers that would make Prussia a more powerful military power. And they succeeded. And other European countries went, well, we got to learn from that. So this entire system is not like some natural way that kids learn. It's the exact opposite of that with tests and competition and beat your, like rather than collaborate with other kids, with your friends on figuring something out, you have to keep it secret because you've got to be tested versus how they're doing. This entire system is based on this extraction, exploitation, militaristic model. So some third horizons idea about education, which have been really developed well by a group called Ecoversities, which would be interesting for people to check on the web, ecoversities.org, I think. Um, and they look at concepts like unlearning. And there are actually different innovative schools out there which actually give kids the actual liberation to design their own learning paths, does not force them into tests, where the grown-ups are there as in the sort of rather than being teachers teaching the kids, they're more like helping the kids to find what they really get interested in and help giving them the resources to then explore with the other kids all around them what they want to do. It turns out that when children can actually design their own paths of learning, they end up learning far more, and they even get to be more successful in the standard system because they become self-generated in what they want to do, and they end up choosing to study hard and figure out their own way of doing that in order to be successful.
Thank you. We just have a couple minutes left, and I'm just wondering, as we've talked about, there's so much here, and this conversation deserves a much deeper
Mm.
inquiry into all of these different channels that we've sort of just grazed the surface of. But is there something that you can distill a hope that you have readers or listeners will take away from your book or this conversation?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, it's the very message of the book that it starts out with and it kind of ends with that even though in our dominant system, we've been told that this is the only system there is. There's this famous quote from somebody called Frederick Jameson saying that you might have heard of, saying, for most people, it's easier to visualize the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism. Um, and this book is designed to show that there actually is an alternative. And that's so important because once millions of us realize, this is not true what we've been told, that we're stuck within this system, then we start looking out for those alternatives ourselves. And then we can start to join basically this whole global conversation of actually moving towards those alternatives, moving towards that third horizon. And imagine if we're all sort of walking along in this kind of unmapped territory, but that third horizon actually becomes visible to us, and we start talking about how we get there and what it might actually look like. That would change our entire dynamic of how we're relating to this dominant system right now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I've been speaking with Jeremy Lent about his latest book, Eco Civilization: Making a World That Works for All. This is Terra Verde on KPFA, co-produced with the Earth Island Journal. Jeremy, I really can't thank you enough for joining me on the show today.
Well, thank you, Fiona. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Really appreciate it.
For me as well. Thanks, as always, to our listeners. Terra Verde is made possible by donations, so please consider donating to KPFA today to keep community radio alive and thriving. You can do that at kpfa.org, where you will find this episode of Terra Verde and all of our other shows in the online archive. Thanks again, Jeremy.
Very welcome. Thank you.
You know, the modern economy is fascinating. You pay to watch TV, you pay to listen to music, you pay to store your photos. I'm not going to name names, but Rod has an app that reminds him to drink water.
Wait.
And we're not judging, we're just saying if you're going to forget you're paying for something every month, make it KPFA. We'll even let you name the price. You let us know how much KPFA is worth to you. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a monthly sustainer, a guardian of KPFA. Feeling cheeky? Do 10. Feeling generous? Do 50. Since 1949, listeners have kept this place alive by giving what they can. You pick the number. We'll keep the radio on. KPFA.org.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online everywhere at kpfa.org.